Welcome everybody. Blessed are those that visit this channel and enjoy the content here.
When we talk about meta game, and I guess you could call them macro concepts in how we play Counter-Strike, what the meta is at the moment, what the most efficient, the most effective, the most, to use the DDK saying from poker, the most plus EV, plus expected value plays, like concepts, strategies, individual tactics that implement them. Believe it or not, a lot of these are often either misunderstood, ignored, or just not explored by pro players, and so by extension, even some of the coaches in the scene. I mean, pro players just tend to be thinking more about their individual game. How was their aim that day? Are they hitting their shots? What angle am I holding? What fight am I going to take? How am I going to peek into this guy? How am I going to take a specific duel with someone? Who is it I'm fighting against? What are his tendencies? What were the comms that my teammates giving me? What's the score of the game? What does it mean if we win this? There's all sorts of things going around. So as a result, many pros don't play the ideal strategy and implement the ideal tactics for each scenario. Of course they don't. They're just human. Not everyone has the same game knowledge and understanding. And crucially, these things aren't taught to people. So think of, I'll give you basically a simple example, which is if you've ever seen someone play the game Blackjack, where you're trying to get to 21 with the 2 cards and you have the extra cards and the dealer's playing against you, etc. What people might not realise is Blackjack was basically solved years ago, and you can literally get like a little sheet online that just tells you with your hand and the dealer's hand, here's what the most ideal play is. And if you memorise it, you don't even have to know most of it, like 85% of it. You actually have like close to a 50-50 chance when you play Blackjack, assuming you're not card counting. So in that scenario, this exists. Everyone who has a smartphone could get it. They get it right there and just play in Vegas. Does everyone use it? Do they fuck? Most people don't. The majority of people, because again, it's a game and people play games and have fun with games. They don't work at games and study games and focus in the same way. A lot of pros are having fun while they're playing as well. A lot of people who play Blackjack, they just go off feel or luck or hey, last time he did this at weird superstitions, instead of using this solved approach, the most ideal approach there is. Again, it's something you see elsewhere. By the way, I'm not blaming esports pros entirely here. You see this in sports. Like, it's actually crazy how many years it took after the three-point line was invented. I think that was invented in like the late 70s, maybe, like 79, maybe, around that period in time, I think. Yet, people didn't figure out the concept of all these three-point shots for years, literally decades. We're talking like 30, 40 years. Because what had to happen was people had to not only train people properly how to take three-pointers, especially the corner three-pointer and open three-pointers, but they also had to understand the concept that because it's a percentage chance of making the shot of 3 instead of 2, believe it or not, people didn't understand back then that something like, I think it's 36% from 3, is the same as shooting 54% from 2. And there are not many players in the NBA who shoot over 50% from 2, or at least not volume shooters. So actually, 36%, which doesn't sound that good, I'm sure even 40%, which is what the great three-point shooters were expected to have. People thought, what's the point? Just dump it down low to the centre. It's like, actually, that makes less sense, unless that's a monster like Shaq. In a lot of scenarios, you can get an open look for a guy that's actually good. It's going to be better in the game. So as a result, now everyone plays small ball. Everyone fires a million threes. Everyone's scaled up how many threes you can take. Similarly, so, I mean, the funny thing about that, by the way, is that was always there. So even compared to Counter-Strike, we had the Krieg, which was always there the whole time, and no one understood how OP it was. Similarly, in the NFL, to this day, because that's another sport that's a lot of it's like old school thinking and entrenched ways of doing things in the game and what it means to be a coach. They don't go by a lot of the analytics, believe it or not. So most coaches in the NFL still don't go for it in a bunch of key, like you're behind in the game, 4th down scenarios. Like they just don't. It's like, I mean, I'll give you like a similar scenario from the NFL that always sticks in my mind when I think of this kind of scenario, which was the one where the Broncos, in the first year Peyton Manning played for them, were super hot coming into the playoffs and a big win streak, and they were playing the Ravens, and they, at the end of the game, with 31 seconds left, had the ball, 2 timeouts, and just kneeled with one of the best quarterbacks ever, and basically just went to overtime and lost the fucking game in overtime. It was so stupid. And by the way, yeah, listen, they lost to like a Hail Mary, which is ridiculous, and someone fucking up a defensive assignment. But like, they could have gone for the win there. Like, it wasn't actually as risky as you might think in that scenario. So, like, that's an example for me where, regardless of the outcome of the game, you didn't play the ideal strategy, one most likely to win you the game. So let's just think about this. In Counter-Strike, I want in the future coaches to think this way. It's something they do in games like League of Legends, but that's because a League of Legends game is one entity. It's one thing that starts a way and transforms into something else and then ends a certain way. So you have to kind of have a sense throughout it how you're trying to play out, what the opponent's going to try and do, what your win conditions are. So that's the key term there, win conditions. I want people to be coached as they come up in CS to understand on T side, on CT side, on specific maps, what are the win conditions I have right now. It's not just kill the opponent. It's not just plant the bomb, defuse the bomb. It's how we want to play, how much risk we want to take, depending on our personnel, and what do we want to do generally when faced with the same macro scenarios over and over again. So a focal point of mine has been this kind of thinking in Counter-Strike. Like in 1.6, for example, I always thought it was very misunderstood by a lot of pros as CT, just generally, that actually many scenarios you want to outright deny a plant because, I mean, I would usually say like a general rule would probably be if you're even in numbers as a CT or you're one man up. Because if you're even, then in that scenario, once the bomb is planted, the T's are now defending. They can use the angles against you. They can catch you. Like at that point in time, it's advantageous to them to have the even scenario, right? If you have one man up, you have such a big advantage. You stop the bomb going down. You stop them getting into situations where they can use angles against you. And now you can still potentially force fights where you win with the overwhelming amount of numbers. You don't have to let them plant and then you be the one on the clock. You be pressured, etc. The clock works against them almost as an extra man to you, by the way, before they plant the bomb, because at that point in time, if they don't plant the bomb and they don't kill you, you win the round as the CTs. People ignore this. People take it as though the game is always like identical and uniform between the two sides. It's just about who kills who and then who does the final objective. No. Until the CTs are killed, the clock is working in their favour. It is on their behalf that the clock actually exists. Once the bomb is planted, a different clock comes in the bomb time. Now that's on the side of the Ts. They're the ones who now have nothing to do in theory, and it's the other team that must take action. One team can win with inaction, depending on the situation. So that brings us to the central topic I'm highlighting in this video, which is I think it's actually been missed by pros, that this is a deny the plant meta in a number of key scenarios. So one key thing about this, which makes it even more than just theory that I gave before, is we're in a meta where the CT economy has to spend more money and is punished harder than the T economy for a variety of reasons that I talk about in that video. Now, that essentially boils down to the gist that as CTs, winning the round isn't enough. You have to win the round and keep enough people alive that you still have the full rifle buys, enough utility, etc. kits. All these scenarios, these all increase your chances of winning the round, of course. The terrorists need far less and can just win the rounds effectively. Now, one of the issues in this sense, okay, is similarly from that economy, the Ts get this weird advantage and boost early because they need less money, regardless of whether they win the pistol. And it was even worse with the Krieg being OP, but at least the Krieg's nerfed now. So think of this key principle. I referred to it earlier. So the question is, who is on offense and who is on defense? Now, it's not as simple as, well, the terrorists are on offense and the CTs are on defense. No, you've missed the entire premise of what I'm talking about and the kind of thinking I'm talking about if you believe that is the case at all times in Counter-Strike. It isn't. When the terrorists plant the bomb, they become the defensive team because they're defending that planted bomb from being defused. When the CTs start the round, they are the defensive team. Why? Because they're defending the bomb sites against bomb plants. And as soon as the bomb is planted, they are no longer the defensive team. But that secondary part, everyone knows the first part. Pros do, at least. Pros don't think about the game that way, though. They still think it's about duels. It's about who wins the round at the end of the round. They don't think about the fact that, like, I'm giving up the advantage when the bomb goes down, potentially, depending on the amount of people left alive in the situation. So think about this. In the same sense, we'll take a famous rule of thumb. It's about trading. And it goes, the reason why trade fragging is generally the tactical way to play Counter-Strike is because every time the numbers are even, for the Ts, before the bomb is planted, that is actually favourable for the Ts because the CTs have less players and have the same number of players as the Ts, but crucially, the CTs have to cover 2 bomb sites until they know where the bomb's going to be planted. So their defense is spread thinner, whereas the Ts can always choose to bunch up and just attack the site with overwhelming numbers. So in this kind of a scenario, there's a similar concept that should take place post-plant, but with this economy and CSGO, I think does not actually, which is if you're in like a 3v3, think about this. and you are the CTs, and the bomb's planted, and you trade down, so you let the bomb get planted, then you trade down, so like, I kill him, he kills me, my teammate kills him, he kills my teammate, but then I kill him, and that means we win the 1v1 at the end. It's a 1v1, and the CTs win it, so they're the last alive with one guy, and they defuse the bomb. Right, in that situation, they're going to be in a worse economic situation than the Ts many, many times. And bear in mind, yes, at the top elite level, we have some amazing individual players who can kill 3-4 the whole team. But at the standard level, if we imagine all players are equal, and this trading concept comes in, that's going to happen a lot if you let the bomb get planted. Thus, denying the plant is a key play many times overlooked in a lot of these situations. Think about on B site of DOS 2, just as an example. I'll just give you one off the top of my head. So in late 1.6, it actually became the standard CT meta for both bomb sites to just give them up when the Ts charge them with numbers, let them plant and play retake. And that just became the way to play the game. And then obviously potentially save if you have like 2 or 3 people left and they have full 5, and then that's it. That's also one of the reasons why retake meta became part of it. Now, saving in the same way in CSGO, even though it does have utility, I think in this meta even it might even have more because you need the people alive. I actually don't necessarily know that people do it as much as 1.6. I don't think they do really. So in this kind of a scenario, I think there's often going to be more utility. I'm talking not about the grenades itself. I'm talking about the premise of utility, the concept, in the guy who plays in the B site on CT side, delaying as long as possible for rotations to rush when he knows people are coming B, and then his main aim is just go 1 for 1. And while he's going 1 for 1, if 2 or more people are going in the site and they seem to have the bomb, the second guy should probably also engage into the site. The guy who plays mid or outside the door should probably be engaging to try and kill and or deny the bomb being planted. Again, to allow more rotation time for people from catwalk or people dropping from long A and running through, or even the guy doing a massive flank. Because if you deny in this scenario, I think your chances generally are higher to win. Now, it's not going to apply to all situations, of course. People are going to be able to think of exceptions now, and the reply guys always will. Who gives a fuck? So the point here is, if I coached a team, I would try and set in place a general flowchart of what we do in these situations so that we know when we're playing ideal strategy. Think of when Chuck Daly had the Jordan rules, where it's like you funnel him into the centre, then you take a foul, but if you take a foul, make it a hard foul, 2 or 3 people hit, because there's only ever going to be 1 foul. Like, they had the ideal strategy down to stop a volume slashing shooting guard in the NBA. They had the best strategy we've ever seen to shut someone like that down. So I would hope that as coaching changes over the years, people start to understand this and they get a concept for these principles and what meta we're at the moment. I mean, obviously at the moment, the problem is they're in a deny the bug meta. This video was kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Spencer Green, Whattathings, Pronogo, Matt Shakowski, Tobias Bernasconi, JDubs, Alexander Rao, Xinged, the Puyallup Tribe, Jensen Goh, Hades, Andreas Kroknes, and as always, a special thanks goes out to my boy Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you want to ask me a question in one of those video AMAs I do. Do you want teasers? Do you want to see who the next guests are on my shows? Do you want to take part in an in-depth esports discussion with moi? Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today in the Patreon link in the description box below.